In this video, we'll configure AWS Authentication using AWS Amplify Gen 2 in Next.js. We'll use Amplify template to initialize and configure the authentication resources. And then we'll build up the front end in Next.js Server Components. Now, before we begin, I assume you have the latest Node.js installed in your system and you have the AWS account connected with your computer terminal. Server components are special type of React components that run on the server rather than in user's browser. Because they run on the server, they can do things like fetch data from database, access secure information, or interact with server APIs without exposing the data on the client. Server components runs on the server. With that said, the page can load faster because there is less JavaScript for the browser to process. When using authentication with server components, the authentication logic typically happens on the server. Here's how it usually works. A user logs in by providing their credential, like username and password, on the login page. Once the server verifies the credential, it creates a session or a token, like JWT, that proves the user is authenticated. When a server component needs to fetch data, it can check the user session or a token to ensure they are authenticated. If they are, the component can fetch and render the data. If not, it might redirect user to the error page. Now imagine if you have server component that need to show a list of users' private messages. The component will check if user is authenticated by looking at the session or token, and then it fetches the messages from database. The server then sends rendered HTML to the user browser without any sensitive data being exposed. Now let's jump right into the terminal to create the Next.js project. To create the Next.js project, let's run the command npx create next app and then the name of the app. And in this case, I write the Amplify Auth. Now choose the default options. Now once the setup installed, let's cd into the project folder. And then to install the Amplify template, let's run the command npm create amplify @latest. Choose the default directory here. Now once the setup installed, let's open the VS Code. So inside the folder, you can see the Amplify template. Inside the folder, we have couple of files. The main file is backend.ts where we import all the resources. And then we have directory for auth and the data directory. Inside the auth, we have the resource.ts where we define all the configuration for authentication. Now for authentication, this is pretty much it we need. This will allow users to sign up with their email. In the latest video, we'll see how we can add the social login part with GitHub and Google, and then we'll able to customize this file more. Now to use this Amplify authentication on the front end side, let's open the terminal to run the sandbox. Let me zoom in a bit. And then we need to run command npx ampx sandbox. Now once you run this command, you will notice Amplify created one file at the root of the project, which is called Amplify output. Now this Amplify output will have all the configurations that we define in the Amplify folder, and then we'll need to import this file on the front end to use in our components. To export the configuration, let's create the folder utils. And inside the util, let's create the file configure amplify.ts. Now inside this file, we first need to import the amplify from AWS Amplify. Then we need to import the output file. Now we have the configure handler from Amplify that will take this output file. Now to use this inside the layout file, we need to export this function that basically will return null. Default function and give it a name. Return null. As we are writing inside the server components, we need to set the SSR to true. Now also we need to use the use client directory, so we can use this file inside server components. Now inside layout.tsx, let's import this file. And then let's use it inside body tag. Now this configuration will be accessible in all the component of the application. Now let's create the component directory, and then we'll create signup component. Now we'll use AWS Amplify Authenticator that comes up with built-in form. But same logic will apply if you are building form. Instead, there you will need to use the signup and sign-in APIs provided by Amplify. Now to use the authenticator, we need to install a package. So to install it, let's run npm @AWS Amplify /UI React. Now once installed, let's define the signup component, const signup. Now inside this, we'll use a use fact to check if the user logged in or not. This will allow us to redirect the user to the main page if the user already logged in. To do that, let's import the use effect. And then we'll use the if condition to check if user is exists. Now we'll use redirect from next navigation to redirect the user to the main page. Let's import that. Now where this user will come from? We will wrap up this signup component with authenticator so we can get the user object from props. To do that, let's use export default with authenticator from AWS Amplify UI React, and then we'll wrap up signup component. Now inside this, we'll get the user as a props, and the type of the user will be auth user. Now to resolve this type error, we will return null. Now to use this component inside server page, we'll need to use client directive so we can import it inside server side environment. Now let's create the signup page. And inside this page, we'll import signup component. Now here TypeScript assume that we need to pass the user in this signup component to resolve this type error. Now to fix this, we'll need to declare user as an optional property inside signup component. Now let's check our browser to see how our changes look like. To do that, we run the command npm run dev to run the Next.js local server. Now let's open signup page. And we can see the AWS Authenticator showing the signup form. Now, what actually is missing here is the CSS file that we need to import from AWS Amplify. Inside signup component, let's import slash styles.css. Now, if you refresh, you will see that CSS is being applied. Before we test this, we need to secure homepage from unauthorized use. That means if the person is not logged in, he cannot access the homepage. Now to do that, we need to use Amplify adapter to configure our server, and also we need Next.js middleware to check before accessing the route if user is logged in or not. Now to configure it, we need to install Amplify adapter for Next.js. Now let's create util file, and then we need to import some handler from AWS Amplify, create server runner from Next.js adapter, and we also need to import current user from AWS auth. And then we'll need the config file from Amplify output JSON. Now here we'll call create server runner and we'll pass a config file. Now this create server runner return as a handler that we need to export. Now below that we need to create a function that will check if the user is currently logged in or not. Now inside this async function, we'll create try catch block. Inside catch, we'll just console log any error. Now inside try, we'll call run with amplify server context and we'll pass cookies and return current user. Import this cookie from Next.js, cookies from next header. Now it will take operation as second property and it will return a function. Inside this function, we will return get current user, and inside we'll pass the context that we'll get as a parameter from operation function. And then this will return current user. At the end, we need to return this current user, and that's it. Now we need to import this file inside a middleware so we can use this condition to check if user is logged in or if user is unauthenticated. At the root, we'll need to create middleware.ts. Now inside middleware, let's export a function middleware. Inside we'll get the parameter request and then next request. We'll need to import this from next server. Now inside this we'll use next response from next server and the handler next. We'll store this inside a response variable and then we'll call the run with Amplify server context handler that we created previously. To call it, let's import it from utils file. Now inside this we need to pass two properties. One is next server context. Inside this we'll pass request and response as value. We'll pass operation and it will return async function. Inside this we'll get context as a parameter and then inside a function we'll use try catch block. And inside catch block we'll use a session. We'll fetch this session from fetch of session. Now this session handler will come from AWS Amplify server auth. Now inside this we'll pass context and the empty object. Now this session will check if user have a token or if token is set to undefined. We need to return a condition where we can check if user's token is undefined or not. To do that, let's return the condition session.token is not equal to undefined. In case if user sessions is return an error, will return false. Now to use this condition from this handler, we need to declare it inside a variable. And below this handler, inside if statement, we'll check if authenticated is true, then we return a response. Now this means if user is authenticated, we are processing the route without redirecting user to sign up component. Else we need to return our next response that will redirect user to sign up page. Dot redirect. Inside this we'll call URL instance and we'll pass sign up page as first parameter and request.url as second parameter. Now after this we'll also need to export a config variable where we want to declare which route we want to set as public route and it will pass the request if we access the public route. Now to do that, let's export variable config. Inside that we'll use a matcher property. This is basically an array and inside the array we'll use a condition to make this route as public. Now once we're done with the middleware, let's save the changes and see if we can access the home page. Now, if I go back to home page, now let's open the home page. As you can see, it redirected me back to the sign up page because the home page is authenticated and we need to sign up to access the page. Now to do that, let me type a fake email here and a password. Alright, let's enter the code and hit confirm. It redirected me to the home page. So let's create a sign out button here. So that will log out the user and we'll see if we can still access the home page. Now inside component, we'll create a new file. Inside this, let's create a component. Now inside this, that will have sign out text, and on this button click, we'll create a async function that will route the user to the sign up page. Inside, we'll use a sign out handler from Amplify. And we need to initialize the router from next router navigation. And we'll use the router inside this handler to push the user back to sign up. Now inside server component, if you want to use on click, we need to declare a use client directive as a top. Now we can import this inside the home page. Now we'll import the logout component here. Here we can see a sign out button. If we click on the sign out button, it will take the user back to the sign up component. And now if I want to access the home page again, I need to log in first to access the page. Now let's retype the credential and the password. So it's working. That's how we can use a server component with AWS Amplify Authentication. Now in the next module, we'll see how we can use social providers like Google and GitHub. So if you are building any application, the concept will remain the same. If you like this video, please subscribe the channel. And also if you have any question, just comment down. Thank you so much and we'll connect again.